we're starting to go now. All right, please feel free to
Okay, well, I'm just gonna get started. Thank you so much for being here. We're quite aware that this is the very last session of the day. We had a very intense and very interesting program today. Before I'm introducing myself, I'm just gonna actually hand it over to Abdelaziz Zagag from UN Habitat, who will tell us a bit about what this whole report launch is all about. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Anna. I will be very brief because I think it's a bit late and we want to get into the report directly. But let me just say a few words. And first of all, we're really grateful to the Urban Economy Forum for hosting us today and using this platform to launch this report. And this is a very important, white paper on the topic of artificial intelligence in cities. And as UN Habitat, we are mostly in the domain of urban planning, housing. So we really appreciate expertise from Mila, who have really given us quite a bit in terms of resources to put this report together. And we're very grateful to the authors. So why is UN Habitat talking about the topic of AI in cities? And the reason is because, AI has really manifested itself in cities quite a bit, even some would say at an unprecedented pace, with really quite sophisticated solutions being deployed in the streets, in public places. So at everyday places, we do interact with AI. And in fact, some would say even that cities are becoming experimental sites for these new advanced automated technologies. And local governments and city administrators need to be aware of both the benefits and the risks of these newer technologies. And it's for that reason we've partnered up with Miller to put together this report to really give guidance to local government in terms of creating awareness about the risks and what they need to have in place to really make the best of these newer technologies. And this report captures, as you would see in the upcoming presentations, some really quite very practical aspects of AI in terms of the risks it poses, the applications, and how to put together an AI strategy. And it also includes some really fantastic recommendations and case studies, some of them coming from local governments, such as the AI registry, which some cities have started to implement, an AI registry in terms of really capturing how AI solutions work and being transparent about it, and which helps in the adoption of AI in cities. So this, just to end, this paper really supports UN Habitat's strategic plan in terms of really realizing our goal of getting or expanding the deployment of frontier technology in cities. So it does support that. And also it's aligned to our people-centered smart cities flagship program, which promotes the responsible deployment of technological innovations to realize sustainability, inclusivity, prosperity, and human rights in cities, and our vision of making urban digital transformation work for the benefit of all. So we will be having some follow-up work, but just to conclude, I want to thank Mila for their contribution, the Urban Economy for hosting us, and most importantly, the authors of the report that have put together this fantastic report for us. So thank you, and back to you, Anna.
Thanks a lot. You're kind of hidden behind the flowers. So I'm just going to tell you quickly who Mila is, because maybe that's not clear. So my name is Anna Jan. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Learning at Mila, and Mila is the Montreal Institute for Artificial Intelligence. We're basically a massive research institute, in fact, the biggest in the world in the areas of deep learning, specific application of AI systems. We're doing mostly research, and our mission really is to advance come up with scientific advancements in the area of AI, but make sure that those advances really create an innovation ecosystem that is for the benefit of all. So that's why we were really delighted to work on this report that looks at specific applications in cities, and not only write a report on what are all the fantastic opportunities of AI are, but more importantly, what are the risks and what could be potential tools to make it easier for cities, city governments, city leaders to implement AI systems responsibly. So that's the idea of the report. So I'm really not here to sell you shiny and sexy AI systems or ideas, but rather to have a conversation with you as city leaders to see how can we adopt some of these systems in a responsible manner. I want to make sure to talk a bit about actually the process of the report before we go into the report itself, just to say that it is a highly interdisciplinary team that we put together. There are more than 17 authors that worked on this report, 6 lead authors, and all of them come from different disciplines, really. So we have computer scientists, we have people with a law background, we have people with public health expertise, of course, urban planning and urban design, etc. And it really, that's what it takes, I think, to really tackle that relatively complex questions of artificial intelligence in cities. I just want to make sure that I name the 6 lead authors, and luckily 3 of them will actually join us here on the panel. But just to say, I want to thank Shin Kusaki at UDM, Shazad Jameson from Tilburg University and Mila, Golnoush Fanadi from HEC and Mila, David Rolnick at McGill University and Mila, Catherine Regis at UDM and Mila, and Jean-Louis Dini. In addition, there was an UNH reference group that did a lot of work in it. Of course, the additional students and postdocs and PhD students who worked around those lead authors in their research labs. Of course, thanks to Abdenasir and his team, especially Melissa Permezel, and huge thank you to Rose Landry and Benjamin Prudhomme at Mila. So with that, I'm delighted to introduce you to Shazad Jameson, one of the lead authors. Shazad, in fact, has a background in, well, actually really the intersection of urban sustainability and smart city background, as well as digital governance. So she's very well placed to give us a first introduction of what is this report, what are the recommendations that are, the main recommendations that are coming out of it. And then after that introduction to the report, we're going to go into a panel conversation with the three lead authors with a couple of questions. And this time, I really want to make sure that you get a chance to ask questions. So I'm going to leave at least 10 minutes for questions from the audience, both online, virtually, as well as in the room. Shaz, over to you.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. Can you see and hear me well?
Yes.
Fantastic. So I'm really excited about this intersection of AI and cities. I really think that this is the strategic leverage point for human development and impactful investing. You have a complex technology in a complex space. And when you bring those two things together, there's tremendous potential for innovation, for discovery, for facilitating new urban services, but also for, making public servants' lives easier by automating processes within city government. AI can change the way that we're working, the way that we know about what's happening in the city, and all of the responsibilities and social relations around how that development is done. But what that means is you want to do it well. And AI and artificial intelligence, it's not just a plug and play solution. It's not something that you set and forget it. If there's something that's really come quite strongly out of this work, is that from the very moment of its conception, from the way that you ask questions, the development of AI is deeply intertwined with the way that we think about it and conceive it and human oversight. Next slide, please. So we want to do that well. And what does that mean? It means starting from values. Like Abdenasir mentioned, this is part of the broader people-centered smart cities approach of UN Habitat, and also the deep-rooted responsible AI work in the AI humanity team at Mila. By starting from the values, that's what makes the difference in driving technological transformation and doing AI in cities well. So how do you do that? Next slide, please. Well, we're very happy to say that we have launched this report. I'm very excited and I'm very proud. I think it's really great and you should go check it out. What it is, it's a vertical tool to support and empower local authorities in their urban transformation. Now, what that means is that we really see that city leaders and local authorities are the best placed to understand their city, to know what's happening and to bring innovation together. And also that they have the position that they are public authorities that can also see all of the different social and private dynamics that are happening. That position is powerful, and if city leaders have a sense of vision and capacity, it can be really important. And I think that's what this is, a lot of what this conference is to facilitate. So the report is vertical. And what that means is you can give it to the high-level policymaker who needs a quick overview, get a handle on what are the main topics. It can be passed down to middle management that needs the frameworks and the building blocks to build processes and have an understanding and communicate with their team. And it can also be passed to technical teams who have a much deeper knowledge and really want to get involved in the nitty-gritty. It's quite a comprehensive guide. It's also a reference and a tool. So it's not really something that you read from A to Z, but it is designed to be used and something that you interact with. Next slide, please. So what does it look like? Well, the first thing is that this is the first time that I've seen really clear definitions of what is AI, what are the different types of AI, what does that mean from a technological and technical standpoint, while still being human readable. This sounds really simple, but I've been working in AI for a while, and as a non-technical person, I can assure you that this is not simple. It's not easy to do. And this is the starting point for building understanding and building a common language. So I'm very proud of this, and I'm very grateful to our authors for having made this possible. Next, we have presented a series of applications. The applications cover different sectors in the city, and the idea is to present an overview of existing applications of AI in the city. So not far off future imaginative things, but things that have been proven to exist and work and function and that are present right now, something that you can dive into right away. The sectors we cover are water and waste management and mobility, as you see here, but also public safety, city governance, urban planning, energy, and mobility. And I may be missing one. It's quite a diversity of sectors. Each sector has a series of applications. Each of those applications are cross-referenced with which sustainable development goals they support. They're flagged for high impact, highly locally relevant, and they're also cross-referenced with a variety of risks that are important to be paid attention to in specific cases. Next, the report presents a comprehensive risk framework. The risk framework showcases many different types of risks to keep in mind when applying AI for a more responsible approach. It starts from the idea of the AI lifecycle, which is applicable for all forms of either individual algorithms or algorithmic systems or ecologies. The AI lifecycle is separated into 5 phases: framing, design, implementation, deployment, and maintenance. This life cycle approach is really useful because it starts to be the way that you break down abstract concepts into concrete policy processes. Each phase has a series of risks associated with it. As you can see here, each risk has a short description with really easy to understand examples that makes it really clear why this is important. It's interrelated with other risks, also from other phases. And each risk has a set of reflexive, evaluative questions. So it's something to not provide you with the answers, but to get you to start thinking about the right questions to ask to evaluate how to mitigate those risks in a way that is appropriate to your local context. It's, it's quite phenomenal work, I must say. Next, and the last major section of the report is a tool to support local authorities in building their urban AI strategy. And this is really thinking about concrete, action-oriented recommendations to support local authorities in when they're thinking about, okay, what do I do next? Now that I have an overview of what's out there and what's possible and what are the opportunities, that I have an understanding of what are the risks and what are the things to keep in mind, and some of the ways to go about dealing with that. Next is, well, how do I, start from my own position and design my vision and my plan for the future for the city? I think we have 20 or 21 concrete recommendations. They're divided into 5 general sections, which you can see here. And I will go through them very briefly because I know it's been a long time. The first and my big #1 thing, particularly at an international space like this, is to start from the local context. We've talked about values. I also want to emphasize the importance of investigating pre-existing infrastructure, pre-existing databases, what exists locally on the ground, as well as having a diversity of local knowledge and local input from many different people within society. The people who are on the ground in the city are the ones who know what works. It's not about buying something and importing it and plugging and play. It's not going to work. That's not how things function. The second is to prioritize capacity building. I think this will be familiar to a lot of people in the room, but this becomes especially important with the frontier technology of AI, both in terms of public demystification, but also internally for public servants and people working within local authorities. You need technical capacity, sure, but you also need the non-technical people to be able to understand and evaluate. Even if I don't know how to code an algorithm, I can have an understanding that helps me see how it fits and interfaces with the rest of what's going on in the city. And that capacity is a key site of investment for long-term sustainable development. The third is developing innovative regulatory tools for AI. Abdel-Nasser already mentioned some of these, like AI registers, but these are some of the more, let's say, traditional tools that city governments will have, and how can we use these tools to shift towards a responsible approach for developing AI. Things like standards for data access, things like certifications, things like monitoring and impact assessments for developing and adapting over time, things like building procurement clauses, which there's a huge movement right now among local authorities and innovation for using procurement clauses as a place to evaluate AI and to set the values that we think are important for what is coming in. Fostering cross-sectoral collaborations, especially important in the development of AI, particularly because it is a frontier technology and there's a lot of questions that come up at that intersection. And lastly, building horizontal integration. And by this, we're talking specifically about internally to the organization of the city council or the local authority, either as integrated municipal structures or as having technological leadership, like a chief technology officer, or at the very least having a clear product owner who kind of spearhead the transformation. So I will leave it there. That's a lot, but I think it gives you a flavor for just what is there to be used. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion. Back to you, Anna. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Shaz, and thanks for that great overview. By the way, the report is over 100 pages long, not to scare you, but just to say it's not easy to summarize 100 pages in about 10 minutes. So lots of rich information and detail, obviously, there. I'm now delighted to invite Professor Golnoush Farnadi to the virtual stage, as well as Professor David Rolnick, who are going to join us. Both are also lead authors of this report. Professor Farnadi is professor at Mila and at HEC in Montreal, and she's also the holder of the AI CFAR chair, as is in fact Professor David Rolnick. And in fact, Professor Farnadi was the author of the risk framework, and I'm going to ask you. I'm going to start with a question for you, Golnoush. How? I mean, first of all, Shaz talked already a bit about the risk framework. Maybe you can tell us a bit about what that AI lifecycle actually is, and why is it important to build a risk framework specifically around that lifecycle as you think about the application of AI in a city context. And then I have a second kind of follow-up question as well, but I'll let you answer that one first.
So can you hear me actually?
Yes, very well.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and discussing about the work that we did, and we work on it hard for several months. And thanks all the authors that are here actually, like after a few months I'm seeing you. It's a pleasure. Regarding the AI lifecycle, so the reason that we coming up with this risk taxonomy is that we believe that AI is a tool, but can be used for good and bad. And AI as a tool it's not defining the purpose unless we are defining the purpose for it. So these kind of purposes can be defined based on the stages that you are developing AI. So that's why we think about the risks that can appear for AI through the life cycle. Because often people, when they are thinking about AI, they are thinking about the algorithm itself. And if they want to be a bit better, they also consider the data. But AI is not just about the algorithm. It's about like how it is framed as a question, like whether AI should be used or not, how it is designed to be the tool for the purpose that they are going to be used as, and also the way that they are collecting the data for the purpose of the AI, up to the point that it's dynamic, right? The AI is implemented for a purpose and it's going to be used for several times or several months or several years. And we have to consider how the environment is also going to change. So all the risk around like how we should maintain the AI system in the environment, and also how if the AI is going to be cancelled as a system, how we should, for example, make sure that the data that has been collected by AI is going to also be disposed. So that's why we actually consider this idea of like the AI life cycle of the different stages. The tool that we provided, as already Shaz talked about it, is for awareness. It's a comprehensive, but it's not a complete list of all the risks that can appear. We try to make sure that we are listing all the important ones, but by no means it's a complete risk, because the risks are actually kind of like with the same nature that we have AI that they are developing. Even the risk, we are recognizing them every day. But the goal was to kind of increase the awareness about like this risk can appear throughout the life cycle. And the way that we design this tool is that we also connect the risk to each other to kind of make it clear that if you're not addressing this risk at this stage, it can also kind of amplify another risk in another stage, right? So for example, if you're not thinking about the diversity of the team, all the fairness issues that can appear for the data collection, because people are not really looking at it, at the design, at the framing, they cannot really understand that they have to, for example, collect the contextual data like that are representing of the society. So that's how we are designing this AI lifecycle and the questionnaire to kind of like understanding how to recognize the risk and how to mitigate it.
Thanks so much. I think you obviously make a real point around the kind of a more holistic approach and a more of like a long-term approach around that life cycle. And Shah's already mentioned also with the importance of the local context and to really think about that. Could you maybe talk a bit about some of the more, in a way, more local or specific mitigation strategies that you're seeing or that you would recommend can be applied here, and how can that be, in a way, embedded better in local context?
Let me answer this question with a couple of examples to kind of clarify like why we need to localize the development and also implementation and maintenance of AI systems. One of the reasons is that we have different regulations around the world. I am working on algorithmic discrimination and privacy, for instance. And we do have data protection laws that are different around the world, including also UEF4, like anti-discrimination laws, right? So if you're thinking about like how you should design a system in order to be fair, it's going to be very different when you're considering the context, right? In one country, they are caring about one way of like anti-discrimination laws, and another country is very, very different. So some aspect of the localization is going back to the way that we have regulations around the world. But it's not just about the regulation. So I mentioned about the data, right? So the data, if it's not geographically representative of the environment, it is not local, you may actually miss contextual information and also cultural aspects. So if you're thinking about this example of like you have texts that are going to be a description of the image, we have AI systems that are, for example, using the data that are annotated by people. If the annotators are not really understanding the context, the culture of the image, they can actually make a mistake. And you can understand like if you are implementing it, what would be the consequence. Simple example that is very common in AI conferences is that if you have the picture of the weddings in Africa is going to be different than the picture of the weddings in India and in Western countries, because the color of the dresses, the way that they are having those dresses is very, very different. So thinking about the annotators who cannot really understand the context, they cannot really describe it in a way that the AI is going to learn from that data, right? So if the description is not correct, how AI can actually learn from it. So kind of like giving you examples of like how can be the consequences of not considering this kind of contextual aspects and cultural aspects. I hope this answered the question.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm going to shift gears a bit now and kind of look again a bit. You started already talking about applications and examples, and I'm going to invite Professor Volnik to talk specifically about some examples or very promising applications. And I'm going to ask you, I mean, you're really mostly a really world-renowned expert on everything that is around at the intersection of AI applications and mitigation of climate change effects. So under that heading, and I think sustainability generally is really interesting to this specific audience as well. What are your 2 to 3 top applications that you can think of that are really relevant in a city or settlement context that you would kind of basically, I mean, not recommend, but really think that there is a real opportunity for cities to implement them and to take advantage of that technology.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, and it's a pleasure to be part of this discussion and to have been part of this report. I can touch on a few families of applications because I wouldn't really say that there is, a top application, more than there are so many different things where AI can be one piece of the puzzle. And again, I think that's a theme that we see throughout our report, that AI is rarely the answer to anything, but can be sometimes a useful tool when used in conjunction with other tools. So across the areas, you mentioned relevance to climate change mitigation, so reducing the reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and also climate change adaptation, so responding to the effects of climate change. There are a lot of different uses of AI that may be relevant to different cities to different extents. For example, there may be different use cases that are particularly relevant in the global north versus global south, or in a high emission context versus a low emission context. But some that I want to highlight in particular are electrical grid optimization, which can mean many different things. That can include understanding how much electricity is going to be produced at a given moment in time, which can be really important as we have more generation from solar and wind, which vary from moment to moment. So we need to know how much power is going to be produced, and also how much power is going to be consumed at any given moment, because the amount of power produced has to match the amount of power consumed. So to reduce wasted power and also to enable more integration of low carbon energy sources, this is really important. And we see both in urban contexts as well as in non-urban contexts. Likewise, literally the control of the grid can be really useful. So how much power should be produced at different generators in the context of controllable power sources. Increasingly, we're seeing uses of AI in this context as well. And also in the context of demand response. So changing where demand, for example, in personal homes, when you have appliances that could be turned on at different times of the day or night, as there may be more or less power, or the carbon intensity of power may shift from moment to moment. So changing that automatically can be really useful. Electric vehicle charging is another good example of demand response here. And we're seeing this already being used in many contexts. For example, the UK's national grid recently implemented AI algorithms for forecasting the amount of electricity demand and cut their error rate in half. This has previously been done very much by hand. So these kinds of applications are very much present right now. It is important to remember in such kind of context, though, in any kind of optimization context, what are you optimizing for? You might want to optimize for cost, but that's not always the same as optimizing for lower carbon, lower greenhouse gas emissions. So really thinking in terms of what are you asking your algorithms to do very carefully. At best, your algorithms are going to do what you tell them to do. Sometimes they won't even do that. But if you're asking them to optimize for something, make sure that they're optimizing for the thing you actually want. So the second family of applications I want to highlight here quickly is building optimization. There are various different contexts in which this is useful here to reduce the emissions associated with buildings. First of all, understanding building energy use. In many places, we don't know where buildings are, what their footprints are, and what energy use there is. AI is being used with satellite imagery to find building footprints and the heights of buildings to understand approximately how much energy is being consumed within different parts of a city or settlement. This can be really useful for shaping policies. There are also control algorithms within buildings to reduce the amount of energy used by heating and cooling systems. This is something my own group works on, Mila collaborating with the company Brainbox AI. But this is an opportunity to really reduce the amount of energy consumed in a building context. There are also smart buildings with sensors, though I want to highlight for some of these things, it is not necessarily the lowest hanging fruit in terms of reducing building energy emissions. If you were given a choice between adding some cool sensors to your building and insulating it better, definitely better to insulate it better. So again, a theme. AI is only one piece of the puzzle. And then the final family of applications that I want to highlight here is climate change adaptation. So responding to, in this case, extreme events, disaster prediction and management, everything from coming up with more fine-grained predictions of how climate change is actually going to affect a particular locality, what's called climate model downscaling, coming up with more localized predictions. So that can be a really useful application of AI in a climate context, because oftentimes the predictions from climate models are very coarse-grained and don't necessarily inform the local adaptation strategies of particular cities. Then also actually responding to disasters. For example, the UN recently introduced a flood mapping tool that helps respond to disasters around the Indian Ocean monsoon season. This is really important in helping response teams be directed to particular parts of communities that are most at risk at that given moment, given the flood waters that are visible from satellite imagery. In all of these cases, of course, AI is not a silver bullet. It's not magically going to stop climate change or avert all the consequences of it, but it can be useful in particular contexts.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And just to say that that's really just kind of scratches again the surface of all the different applications that were identified for an urban context. And again, more in the report, both on the kind of energy, climate adaptation and mitigation side, but as well as an application around public safety, transportation, mobility more generally. I want to bring it back to Shaz and kind of in a way ask a bit like, where do we take this from here? What's the next step? And I mostly want to ask you a bit of like, you know, as a local authority, be that, you know, a mayor of a city, you know, local authority more broadly, and also admitting, of course, or realizing that capacities, resources might vary quite a bit across the globe. But what would you recommend as kind of the next step for cities? What could any local authority kind of do next in order to take advantage really of some of the opportunities that we're presenting?
Thanks, Anna. That's a great question. And I think there's two things. The first is identify local opportunities. And what I mean by that is kind of drawing on the example that Golnush was talking about, that local culture brings local meaning, about the, you know, the different dresses for different weddings. Talking to people locally to understand what is relevant, what is important, what would make a difference, what would have an impact. That's free. That requires intention and some patience, and taking some time to talk to people to find out what's important. I would suggest talking to a wide diversity of people, not only to, you know, break our own filter bubbles, but also because having many different perspectives will go a long way to mitigating many of the risks that are that come up at many different phases along the AI lifecycle. And also, I think that when you really start talking to people, you find out some of the less sexy challenges, you know, the things that start to rub people the wrong way, that if we could just fix this, a lot of time and money would be saved because things would be automated and things would go faster. I think this is where a lot of innovation can happen. And we see, you know, cities like Amsterdam and Barcelona are working precisely at this unsexy applications that are having a tremendous impact on city innovation. So that's the first one. And in a similar line, the second would be to build capacities to monitor over time. One of the running themes from this report is that we can't necessarily predict all of the different locally relevant applications that are possible with such an innovative technology and such a variety of innovative technologies. I mean, we talk about AI, but there's many different types. But one of the things that strikes me again and again is that things will evolve, things will adapt. And if whatever plan you make, if your plan is only about what's happening now and it doesn't allow your people the capacity to adapt over time, that's when the risks come. That's when the problem happens. So I would recommend people to have a slightly longer term vision, build feedback loops at 3, 6, 12, 36 months. Have clearly defined roles and processes, have a responsible AI owner, have an ethics owner, monitor, inspect, and adapt. And this will go a long way to preventing mission creep and to deal with whatever comes up as we go forward on this path. So that would be my two things. Local opportunities, diversity of people, and long-term monitoring over time.
Excellent, thank you very much, Shaz. I'm going to open actually the floor as promised now to questions from either the audience here in the room or online. It's hard for me to see the chat, so if someone online could see if there is a question. If not, I'm also looking here if there are questions. Okay, there is a question.
Thank you very much. I'd like to congratulate Mila and UN Habitat for launching this report, which will have far-reaching consequences and benefits for the local authorities and, you know, the governance in itself. My only question is, I know the theme of UEF4, Urban Economic Forum 4, is urban finance. So it has been stated that spending on AI and IT in general for banks will grow from 6.1% now to something like 623 billion in the course of next few years worldwide. A lot of it will go to what is called a generative AI. So as you know, generative AI is something that you collect sort of data is generated artificially what the consumers are going to use and predict it from the data that's available. So it has good and bad. So financial institutions will benefit from these kind of things. So what I'm wondering is that to what extent local authorities will be able to adopt these technologies that banks, other institutions will have, which means would they need to have a large infrastructure of IT to indulge in this kind of luxury, if you want to call it that way, or in something that, very often technologies are in a way imposed on citizens after it has been done. To what extent there's a democratic process by which people have a way to address this thing. What interests me is that in the preface by the executive director, she mentions a lot about risks. So you also mentioned about it. But we don't really go into how do we mitigate this risk, what extent citizens themselves have any possibility to tackle this. The post-COVID, during COVID, you see many countries using this technology to track citizens' movements in many ways, their behavior, their movement kind of things. Like some countries that have citizens app. You have the citizens app, then you'll find out where you are when you are kind of thing. So I'm just in concern. While the benefits of AI in water supply, sanitation, and green energy would be important, this also would actually, we need to take into consideration this aspect of it. The final thing is that to what extent AI will build its own intelligence, on indigenous intelligence already there. So very often, we don't need to, reinvent wheel all the time. So very often indigenous communities, local communities, a lot of knowledge, how this will eventually feed into the AI. So thanks again.
Lots of questions there to unpack. I'm just going to look at my panelists and see who would like to at least tackle parts of that question. Balnush, go ahead.
I can tackle part of the question. That's exactly what I'm going to do. You mentioned a very interesting point about the algorithms are going to generate some data that can be input to the same algorithms again. Before answering this question, I want to kind of mention that AI is a tool, but we should be very cautious. I think, at least in my opinion, that's why I have this lens of looking at AI as a risk and not kind of advertising about AI as something that can have financial benefits, etc. Because for me, if we are not considering all the risks of the AI, the harm, the cost might be much larger to the populations. The risk that you mentioned has been studied for a specific application. I'm going to talk about it now as an example of how if we are not really careful about how AI systems are going to be used, this kind of generation of the decision of the AI as an input of the AI can actually kind of increase the risk. So there is this very powerful example of the predictive policing, and it is implemented in the US. And predictive policing, if you're not familiar with it, is a system that is implemented for sending the policies to the neighborhoods that they assume that the criminal activities are higher. So what was the problem with the AI system implemented in this context was the AI system was based on the historical discrimination, keep sending the police officers to the neighborhoods that is assumed to be the criminal activity is higher. By sending them to them, the data collection is only happening for those neighborhoods, meaning that it is creating this kind of feedback loop to the system that is keep sending the policies to the same neighborhoods. The research actually started kind of investigating that what is the crime rate in other neighborhoods, that this model is not really sending the policies there. And they realized that crime rate is not different. So it's actually the same, But because the AI system is actually keep collecting the data more and more from the same neighborhoods, they are keep sending them to the same neighborhoods. So I just keep this kind of like mention this example to kind of like clarify that like it is very, very harmful when we are not testing the systems that are going to be used, the data that is generated by the AI system, specifically for the context of discrimination, for the context of fairness. And the other example that you mentioned, I like the example of the COVID, because the AI, it was used as a tool that can be used to mitigate it. But in many countries, it actually increased the privacy kind of leakage for the information that of the kind of part, individuals that were going to be collected. So it didn't really mitigate the risk of COVID, but it's actually create another types of risks that people were not really comfortable of using AI system. So the message that I want to say, I'm not sure if it kind of answers the question, is that we should always be very cautious about using AI. AI is not just the tool that can provide benefits, but if it's not implemented correctly, I think the cost is much higher and systematic cost.
Thanks, Galush. And maybe also to add the one thing, oh, sorry, David, go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks. Just really briefly, don't have much to add here, but second everything that Golnish said. And in fact, in the report, we emphasize that there are some applications of AI that are just fundamentally broken. AI should not be used for certain things. And in the report, we highlight applications in policing and in surveillance, and that there is no way to fix this by sanitizing the data, by sanitizing the algorithms. It's going to be fundamentally broken regardless. And one should just avoid these settings for AI algorithms, period.
Yeah, so I think that's always a good point to keep in mind. There's also things we just shouldn't do, despite the fact that we could do them. And just on the last point you made, there is a lot of work happening on indigenous knowledge, integrating indigenous knowledge, especially in not written form, into AI systems. It's very much the beginning of that, but there are attempts to think a bit about that, what that looks like, how then also who owns that, right? Like who owns those systems? Is it a community that owns it, etc.? I know there's one more question from our audience online. So Michelle, if you want to just unmute.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy actually to see this work. I've been trying to connect big players and I contacted Mila last week. That's amazing. So thank you so much for the Mila thing. I do believe that we are so much to the cut line that we need such a tool. I've been working in public administration for many years, and I know that TES in Montreal is also working on the you must be aware on the administration public aspect, and they needed to pause for a year. So my question is like, isn't it something that should be done to avoid multiplication of effort? Because this is such an important work for the world in terms of the communication to ensure that your work is diffused, first of all. And secondly, I submitted because I was trying to connect big players that way, and I approached behavior actually this summer. It's just such a timing. To actually create an international task force. I integrated something to the resolution of the forum earlier today. So I don't know if you guys could actually have a look at it to adjust the wording, because I'm an expert in public administration, but not in AI. But the idea was really to, because there's still a lot of work to do, obviously, from your side. So it was actually to start to do the framework for the data collection, to actually identify on the governance for a governance application what will need to be like in terms of data coming from the local level for the cities and the town, but in particular the cities, as climate change is more on that side, to start to put team together because everything is moving so slow. So I don't know, you will understand, I believe, while looking at the resolution. And I think that this is something that could be processed at the international pretty quickly, giving like the report that was published by the climate change panel in August, which nobody paid much attention in the media side of things. So that's my question. It's a long question, but I think you will understand it when I'm talking about data and the importance of actually kicking the process on to ensure that this tool can actually be used. Because I was amazed when I heard that the TES in Montreal needed to pause for a full year to actually just put this framework inside in terms of the public administration so that these tools can be applied. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm going to ask our panelists, is responses?
So I'm happy to take a crack at that. There was a lot in that question.
Yeah, it's a
The
comment too.
short version that I understood is that you're curious about a task force for a resolution to support public administration to prevent doubling work.
No, no, that's not it. I'm gonna stop you. I'm asking you specifically if you can look, because there's a timing there that is on. This is something that I was looking at. I'm a connector in live. So I was connecting, doing, and then I didn't know about your work. So I submitted something earlier to the resolution of this forum, not knowing that you were presenting, that is specifically touching the data collection and creating a task force to accelerate that, knowing that TES had to stop their work because, like, in plain language, they realized that public administration of big cities around the world didn't have the maturity to use the tool that you're developing. So I think you will understand while looking at the resolution, and
But
that's
this
what
sounds like something that we can address outside of this panel. It sounds very interesting.
Exactly. I think, Michelle, I think we're going to make sure, that we have a look at the resolution and share that with our panelists. And I think we'll do a follow-up to that panel conversation. I think we're running out of time, but I'm happy that we made it at least two audience questions. Thanks, Michelle, for your question. And I'm just going to hand it over to my colleague Abdelaziz for the wrap up. We have a final question actually for our and this is like a fire, like whatever they call it, like a super quick round. But I just want to make sure that both David Guelnouche and Shaz, if you have 30 seconds in an elevator with the mayor of Nairobi, what would how would you pitch, if you want to pitch at all, the AI adoption in his or her city? What would you say? I'm going to start actually with David, as I see you right now on the screen. So David, Guelnouche, and Chaz.
If I had time with the mayor of Nairobi, I think that I would need to understand the particular projects which are being prioritized in the municipal government, because fundamentally, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach. I'm sorry if this is a bad response to that question, but I don't think that every city should be doing the same kinds of things. And maybe that's a takeaway, that really fundamentally this has to be a listening experience and a collaboration experience. And we have a lot of different recommendations, but if you're a municipal government trying to implement some of those recommendations, what is useful to you will vary based upon your situation. And yeah, work with people who understand the different issues involved.
Excellent. So you would use your 30 seconds to invite the mayor to a coffee to discuss the local context. Guelnouche.
Yeah, exactly. And I would also emphasize that he should talk to local AI providers, not Mila, to empower the people who are doing excellent work on AI in Nairobi. Great AI ecosystem there.
Guelnouche?
I will ask the mayor to start talking with David first about this local context. I think that's really, really important. But also because I wrote about the risk, I would like to kind of increase awareness about the risk of AI, because as I said, there's so much about the advantages of using AI. And I want to kind of ask them to kind of take a step back, wait for the right time for the context to be ready, right? The capacity should be there, the infrastructure should be there, the data should be there. So wait in order to look collect the information, the people that they need to implement it, the data that they need to do it, and also the capacity of the the users, the end users, in order to kind of implement AI. And also be very, very cautious if you are going to buy AI from outside. Of course, auditing it, of course, make it local, kind of like based on the population that you have tested on the population before deploying it.
Explanation, Chaz. 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Sir, madam, you know your city best. AI is dynamic, so make your organization dynamic too. Invest in your people, give them time and space. Invest in your governance. That means feedback loops. That means developing procurement clauses. And let's go for coffee.
Thank you so much. I'm going to leave the final words in the wrap-up comment to our, thank you. Big round of applause to our panelists. And I'm going to leave the final words to my colleague Abdelaziz.
Thanks, Anna, for the great moderation. Thanks to our authors, the panelists, the participants. I think it was a very short session, but lots of key takeaways, even the last segment. I just wanted to say, thank you to the Urban Economy Forum for hosting us again. I think this was really fantastic. But some next steps, we know the report, as Anna said, is around over 100 pages. So we will be doing a webinar on more detail, like 2 hours webinar to break down the content, explain it more. So stay tuned for that. And we're also looking forward to developing actually what we call operationalization tools for different audiences. From the report, if you're an urban planner, if you're a mayor, if you're a procurement officer, we will be putting out some targeted insights for you. So looking forward to that. Thanks again to everyone. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kay.